Hello and welcome to another edition of Press Row here on Rivalry Family Media. I'm Todd Robbins. Happy to have you along with us for another edition of Press Row on this week of weeks for athletics and also for schools here in Massachusetts. Part two on this edition of Press Row of my interview with Fitchburg High School Athletic Director Craig Antocci. On the theme of brighter days are ahead, let's turn our attention to kind of athletics, in Fitchburg over the next handful of years. We'll say 5 years, but maybe it could take longer with differing delays depending on how obviously all of this shakes out along the way. I know you in the years you've been on the job as athletic director, you're starting to kind of get the lay of the land. You've got a good feel for what your athletic department has, what the priorities are that you want to move forward here in this process. As you look at and define Red Raider athletics, how would you define a Fitchburg Red Raider athlete?
We want to act with integrity. And I always define integrity with doing the right thing when no one is watching you, right? That's how I've defined it in my classroom. I used to give out a grade, the integrity grade, which was if I had to, for whatever reason, turn my back on you, you were still doing what was asked of you because it's the right thing. And I would like all of our athletes to act with integrity in everything they do. I think that right now we compete. I think our kids give great effort. I think our kids do a lot of things well. What I really want to see a Red Raider athlete do going forward is I want to see a Red Raider athlete going forward to do the right thing all the time, right? And not because someone's asking you to do it, but because that's who we are and what we do. And that could be, underneath a pile in a football game, out 2 miles into a cross-country course, whatever that thing is, whatever the right thing to do at that moment is, try to get it done. I think if we're doing that, win, lose, draw, we're going to be good people. And when high school athletics is long over, and they're adults, and they are passing these lessons down to their kids, then we'll have a nice chain of growth and learning and foundation that we can continue to build upon going forward. And maybe a lot of words for just that basic feeling of, I want us to be built upon a pillar of integrity, doing the right thing.
No, I absolutely, I love that. Actually, I was literally taking notes because, of course, as an elective teacher in a hands-on class like radio and television, I will tell you, when you turn your back and you have to work with one group while another group has to carry on their own, that's got to be the most difficult piece in my mind of what I manage every day from classroom management. And there's no way to explain or assess that. I love that integrity grade. I wrote that down. That you may have changed my syllabus for next school year, so I like that. Somewhere along the way, it's the great part about these interviews. I get to hear all these things along the way. I appreciate that because students don't. I know we would love to believe, and I, especially with high school kids, love to believe this idea that they're going to altruistically do the right thing inherently, but somehow we have to model it, and somehow we have to assess it in some way, shape, or form so they get how serious it is. I love that.
Yep. So when I came to Fitchburg from Wachusett Regional, the big thing was grit, right? If you're a Fitchburg High student, you have grit. And when I would bring up this integrity grade, I would always write it on the board and I'd break it out. And I would say, you can have grit without integrity, right? You can be tough without integrity, but you can't have integrity without grit, because that grit sits right in the middle of integrity, because you have to have a certain degree of mental toughness to do the right thing, because sometimes it's not the easiest thing to do. Sometimes it's a lot easier to kind of go with the flow or do what's do what's easy, so to speak, right? But having integrity and doing the right thing sometimes requires a good deal of mental toughness, a good deal of resolve, and that's what we want. We want not grit without integrity, but we want grit inside of integrity.
Love it. Absolutely love it. And of course, that's your standard for your student athletes. And of course, the leaders of those student athletes, whether male or female, are those coaches, the coaches that have to work together with these student athletes and be the teacher in the secondary classroom, right? They're not just teachers during the day, but they are teachers in a secondary classroom, as athletics is that natural evolution and extension of the classroom. What are the types of coaches? What do you want from your coaches as it comes to being the leaders of your athletic teams?
Oh, you nailed it. I like to think of the athletic field as co-curricular, right? It happens with the traditional core instruction. It's not an extracurricular. We're not adding it on. So in that way, I want my coaches to be great teachers. If you're a great teacher, then you are going to be successful, because you can be the greatest X's and O. You could be the greatest volleyball player of all time, but if you can't teach the sport, if you can't be a human, if you don't understand the social, emotional component of being an instructor, being a leader, then you're never going to be successful with kids. So across the board, in every position, I would love to have a great teacher. If we have a great teacher, I know we're going to be successful, because any gaps in the understanding of the X's and the O's, so to speak, that can be filled in, that can be taught. But I can't teach you how to be a great teacher. And we have some fantastic teachers on staff right now. Highlight one, because if you just look at the success of our football program right now, Tom DiGeronimo, as an administrator at the high school, as an educator, knows how to connect with the people in front of him, knows how to get his point across on a case-by-case basis, because not all students are the same. I think, he's a sterling example of that kind of teacher coach, right? Now that's focusing only on that educator first model. And I think we have a lot of them in the school. And that's why whenever a position comes open, when they did this year and as they move forward, I'll always look for an educator first, right? You could be the greatest, so to speak, again, player of your sport. You could be in the professional Hall of Fame, but if you can't be an educator first, then you really can't work in Fitchburg. We need teachers.
Such a great point, an undervalued point. I had read a great article a couple of years ago on just that fact, that the most successful coaches, and of course we'll use one that was mentioned in this article because of course it's a Massachusetts connection, it's Bill Belichick, right? He's seen as this phenomenal coach and everyone looks for what's the key to his success. And the article that I read pointed to the fact that as an athlete, he wasn't that successful. He had to learn how to break the skills down that he needed in order to build up to be successful as an athlete. Therefore, he understands how to scaffold that knowledge to athletes in order to get the best performance out of them. The opposition to that would be the star athlete that you're talking about that becomes a coach and becomes the play defense coach. They can't explain how to play defense. They're the one on the sideline just screaming, play defense, because they don't know. They just inherently knew how to do it. They don't know how to tell somebody how to do it.
Right. If I was ever going to write a book, one of the chapters would be entitled, "It's Not About You." All right. And that's for the coach, because it's not about you. I can't tell you how many times I've sat and I've listened to a coach, even when I was playing, tell me about their career. Well, the fact of the matter is, the players in front of you, unless they ask you about your career, probably don't want to hear about it, right? They're trying to play themselves. They're trying to learn the sport. It's not about you as the coach. It's about the student. It's about the player. It is a very student-centric game that we're in, or in Belichick's model, it's a very player-centric thing. You have to be able to get each person to understand how to do their job. And if you can't do that, you won't be successful. It doesn't matter how great you are or how amazing, how fast you could have run when you were a kid. If you can't relate what the job is to get people to do their job, then nothing's going to get done.
No question about that. Indeed, you have some really exciting 5-year athletic priorities that I want to talk about here. One of the things you all have been leading on is combining not just athletics on the field, but actually combining athletics in reaching out. And I think this is such an undervalued point. It's why I love talking with you and the folks at Fitchburg about this, because as a member of the media who tries to push in and work with the athletic department, having that athletics department that understands the other side of that, the need to get your message out, is so undervalued. I think because the job of athletic director is such a busy job with scheduling and buses and healthcare and getting coaches and making sure they're doing the job and all the things an athletic director does. I think sometimes the lost in the shuffle, so to speak, is that getting your message out. And you all are leading right now in doing a student journalism project that you've been working on. You've had student journalists, maybe much like I was when I was a freshman in high school. I was never going to be a Blue Devil athlete. That just wasn't in the cards. But as I've always joked and meant as sincerely as the joke sounds, I was a varsity broadcaster. I started as a freshman and I stayed that way all the way to graduation. And lo and behold, here I am all these years later, still doing that, that piece in the community. You all have started these journalists out as journalists writing for your webpage and getting that out there. And you're looking to expand that farther into the Fitchburg Sports Journal. Tell me about this.
Yeah. Honestly, there are lots of people, Todd, like yourself, that love sports but might not be on a traditional varsity team. I mean, nationwide, people appreciate sports. I mean, and from the interscholastic level, we have so many alumni that are trying to follow what's going on, and there's no information that's getting out to them. So if we're not the point source, then there will be no source. So when I came in, I thought that was a pretty good idea. One, our student newspaper hasn't run in a few years, so there was a kind of hole that was there ready to be filled if someone was willing to kind of work on it. Being an athletic director, kind of having that all duty, right? Someone told me that recently and that one resonated. AD stands for all duties, not just athletic director. So being the athletic director, realizing that, I'm a teacher at the same time and I'm an educational administrator, I'm all these things. I'm trying to find ways to support the kids that want to get involved. We had a web page. We were not getting enough content up there. I thought, how can we get it done? And I said, what better than to invite our students to get involved and start writing? And we're lucky enough in Fitchburg, we have a resource in Chad Garner that I could employ right away to act as a mentor, an editor, and someone to bring these kids along with a real taste of what the profession actually is, having done it for so long. So Chad came in, we started working right away. Like you said, we started getting some articles put up there to the website. And that's evolved over time. And it evolved really organically because of what the kids wanted to do and the people who wanted to be involved. We had Rayshawn Link come on in our broadcasting department this year, and Rayshawn has been excellent at game casts and getting kids doing live play-by-play and commentary. So, I started thinking, how are we going to integrate some of this other content? And that's where the Fitchburg Sports Journal came up. And I decided to kind of revamp the website and get it up there. And now we host podcasts where students can talk anything from sports and culture to our local Fitchburg High sports. We've got the game casts of our games. If you go up on the website now, we've got, I think, about a dozen basketball and hockey games from the winter time. We would have had some spring sports up there as well, but obviously we can't now. And we can still continue to offer written stories. And going forward, what we'll look to do is kind of pull in more talent from the school to really kind of make it more of a robust thing. So it's not just a journalism project anymore. We really want to provide the Fitchburg Sports Journal, which will cover all the sports going on in Fitchburg that we could potentially write about, to offer kind of an insight into our world to, Red Raider Nation that's out there that's still really interested in what's going on with their beloved teams, but can't get the information on it that they want.
Such an important piece as well is that early repetition. The more repetition that you can get in that industry, whether it's writing, whether it's getting on camera, whether it's practicing your voicing, whether it's expressing yourself, makes all the difference in the world. To have that opportunity and that connection with athletics, absolutely phenomenal. I can't say enough good things about the idea along the way. We'll keep promoting it as we continue along the way as well. Another priority.
Thank you.
Over the next couple of years, which I think is, in a socially distanced world, boy, you wish you were offering this sport right now, and that's esports. I've always joked maybe the next thing for all of us is to be the e-athletic director. It may be the way to go in athletics at this point in time, and you all are really working to make your next varsity sport offering an MIAA sanctioned league sport for e-athletics. That's electronic athletics. That's these online gaming competitions you're seeing pop up professionally. The MIAA has a handful of teams competing, and Fitchburg's looking to enter that realm as well.
Yeah, we were actually tracking to enter a team for the spring season. We made all the investments in the technology, in order to really be a serious competitor in esports. You have to have some real power behind your machine. So our tech director, Eileen Spinney, has worked hard to bring those machines in. They're all custom built. so we can have teams of 4 or 5 play at once. We're going to enter, like I said, the esports or the MIA's esports league that I think Shrewsbury won the whole thing last year. And we're going to be one of the first urban schools to be involved in this. So I know our kids are really excited. Traditionalists say, really, sports, video games, like it's not the same thing. But from our perspective, when we discussed it, and the superintendent, Jokla is behind it, it provides a way, again, for students to engage co-curricularly at school. So because it's an MIA sport, now there are stringent guidelines based upon eligibility. Students will have to have their grades up. They'll have to have attendance in school. It's a no-cut sport, so we could take 100 students on the team if we wanted to. They compete in games like Fortnite or Rocket League or League of Legends, I think are the 3 that I can think of right off the top of my head on the platform, play.bs. And, honestly, if we have 100 kids that are willing to stay after school and play video games at the high school in a supervised environment, making sure that their attendance is great and their academics are great, then I think that's a win, right? That's a win. And we have a great amount of interest in it. So, the second we can get back in the building, we're going to keep pushing forward. And right now we'll track into the fall of 2020 as our first season.
And you point out another, important aspect of this, kind of twofold. One, it's a non-traditional sport, so you're going to reach a very different type of athlete, but you're also going to create another gateway. And this is the kind of the long lost, but point we've been highlighting a lot here on Press Row, which is the importance of athletics reaching out to students in order to get them into the building and to engage with the school. It's such a kind of a missed point, maybe broadly out in public, is that people forget that maybe you weren't a school person, so to speak, when you were growing up, but because you wanted to be an athlete, you wanted to be able to compete. If this is another way to reach a group of kids who want to be an athlete, want to be involved in this esports environment, and to do that, you have to go to school, attend, and do well in your classes in order to reach that point in the day. That's a win-win all around.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And esports, although it's non-traditional, there are professional teams. The Crafts own an Overwatch team. People are making livings playing video games. The NBA is out right now, and they're having NBA 2K tournaments where the players are playing with themselves, which is very interesting. So, although it seems non-traditional to our age group, the kids, this is where they live. They're digital natives, right? This is their land. So all we're doing is listening to what they want and providing it for them, right? People would say athletics requires running and jumping, right? But I look at it in another way. Athletics at its core is really about being competitive, right? Finding a way to deal with the emotional highs of winning and the emotional lows of losing and kind of balance those things out. And esports is going to provide that kind of training ground, those life lessons for these kids to learn. And it's something that's relatable to them in their generation.
Indeed it is. Well, we'll see where it comes. I'm impressed that you've listed off as many games as you have. I've been trying to, and I joke with my kids all the time because they talk about this at school as well. And I'm like, there's never going to come a day where I'm doing Overwatch play-by-play. That's going to be a stretch for my NBA 2K, I got a shot. At least I understand something about what's going on there. The rest of it, you lost me somewhere along the way. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe that's that old man get off my lawn thing already said. I don't know. I can't see myself doing it. But we'll see. Maybe in a couple of years, you're doing it. You've also been working on forming up this Fitchburg Athletic Advisory Council. This is something different schools means different things. And of course, how active or engaged it is depends obviously a lot on the individual school and district. Talk to me about how you envision the Fitchburg Athletic Advisory Council functioning.
Yeah, so this is something that, it kind of got backburnered because we left school, but I'm really hot to get this thing going. Want to engage some key stakeholders around the city, heads of our youth sports leagues, as well as some of the top administration, like the superintendent of schools, so we can get a strategic plan going here. Where do we really want to be in 5 years from now, right? Coming out of kind of listening to what the kids want, we get esports. Well, there's a lot of other things that people want, right? But if you rely on just me to ideate, right, or try to sift through what people are telling me, then there's a good chance I'm going to miss something. Where if we can get these people in a room and we can really think about, okay, as the city of Fitchburg, where are we trying to get to? Now we can develop benchmarks and kind of a roadmap for how we're going to get there. And one of the key points there is, in an urban city like Fitchburg, where we've had, a real demographic shift, a lot of young families moving in. It's a highly transient population that kind of flips over in the high school every year. How are we going to get kids engaged with athletics, engaged with these co-curricular activities early on? So that means increased programming for grades 4 to 6. I interviewed saying we need more intramurals. We had a very popular intramural program at Memorial School where the kids were playing volleyball this year, and we get up to 80 kids on Friday afternoons playing volleyball in the middle school. A huge demand. So what other demands are out there? How can we, asks, ideas and develop a cohesive strategy so, we're not kind of taking 2 steps forward and 3 steps back, at times, and losing ground. Because we play in a very competitive league in the Mid-Watch. We play against, we're an urban island with lots of suburban schools that have a lot of resources from the family side that we don't have. So how can we provide those to our students to really increase not equity in ownership, but equity of access? So that Fitchburg Athletic Advisory Council is something that I really want to get off the ground really as soon as we can kind of start meeting again, right? Because Zoom meetings can get awkward. So fall 2020 going forward, so we can start to put this cohesive strategy together, get better utilization of our facilities, aid in the youth leagues where necessary, provide youth leagues where none exist. There's a lot of opportunity there. There's some fertile ground that really hasn't been plowed. So I guess that's what I'd say. That's what we're trying to do. I'm going to try to invite those discussions and start turning that ground over.
You guys have done a really great job. You've gone through this evolution, I think, in Fitchburg athletics, where you went through the lean years, the years where your participation numbers dropped lower and lower and lower, whether it's because of population, involvement, what have you. You went through that time period. You're now coming out on the other side, and you're getting to that point where your numbers are steadily increasing. You could see it. Football program is a great example of it, where your numbers had dwindled down and got to that point where people were worried about a potential extinction somewhere in a short order. And all of a sudden, your numbers have grown back up, and in a matter of a handful of years, that can turn participation numbers around. And a lot of that has to do with, as you said, whether it's youth engagement, whether it's the translation between the middle school and getting people involved there to then bring them to the high school. There are so many different ways that you can make athletics more engaging, involved, and of course a place where people want to be, which is of course a really great way to grow that point. And one of those items that I know you're looking to do that with is Fitchburg soccer. It's something that you are looking to continue to invest in and grow, and your population certainly, I think, demands and wants to see that. You're talking about 8 or more nights at Crocker Field coming up this fall for games, and obviously getting them back on that turf is a really important part of a kind of a centerpiece, getting them under the lights at Crocker Field.
Yeah, it's a centralized location, so families can come down and watch some soccer. We've got a great relationship with Fitchburg Youth Soccer. Our soccer coaches have worked really well with them in the off season to facilitate off-season workouts for youth kids in the town. We opened up the field house at Fitchburg High School to Fitchburg Youth Soccer on Monday nights in the wintertime, and they would have anywhere from 50 to 100 kids every Monday night come in and work on their touches. These are all young kids that really wouldn't have this opportunity otherwise. We're not Acton. We're not going to go down to some of the local indoor facilities. So if we're not providing it, it doesn't exist. But like you said, our community, and look at the success that Leominster's had in soccer. I mean, the Uruguayan community has totally embraced Leominster soccer, and it has exploded. And it's so much so I believe you had a district championship last year. So I think, that possibility exists in Fitchburg too. We've got a rabid soccer fan base, but if we relegate it to the fringes, playing at 3:30 on fields unknown, no one's ever going to rally behind it. So I made a commitment this year to put soccer games down there in the fall. We've got some boys and girls varsity action back to back on a few nights, and we've got a couple standalone nights. I can think of, we've got one night with the Leominster girls at 6 p.m. The date on the top, I can't think of it off the top of my head, but it promises to be a great night because they played a great soccer game last year, and it's exciting. And I think getting them down under the lights, we're going to be able to pull in those, you know, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th graders just to come watch soccer because it's fun and they enjoy it. And maybe they'll start thinking to themselves, boy, I can't wait to get under the lights to play soccer. And if we can kind of plant that seed, then we're going to win. We're going to win, you know, big in the long term.
And it's a win that you've got to have, of course, the facility to support it as well. And the growth of Crocker Field and the development, both of the Crocker Field Restoration Committee, the support from the city, and obviously the community. I know this is so vitally important. And of course, it leads to the question of, you know, to eventually convert away from a natural surface to, you know, a turf surface. And that creates a whole nother debate between purists. The reality is, as you said, that is such a centerpiece facility. People want to be there. And really, I mean, a natural surface in this day and age, this region, is just it's not a great thing, right? So turf is likely the future, perhaps, at Crocker Field to create those awe-inspiring opportunities of a track and a turf surface that are there and are centrally located in the middle of downtown Fitchburg.
Oh, yeah. Wouldn't that be nice? If we could get that done, if we could get about $3 million to fall out of the sky, it would be the best for the city. It sits in a historical district. There are very few places that are like it around the state. You know, if you drive to fields around the state, very few have that kind of mystique, right? If you pull up the Crocker Field and you're not from Fitchburg on a Friday night, it's interesting. And Doyle is the same way. When Doyle became turfed, it really added something. So, you know, we've got some amazing people working really hard to upkeep Crocker Field, and you don't hear too much about them. The Crocker Field Restoration Committee, they work their butts off to constantly repair and upgrade that facility. Without their efforts, that facility would not be as beautiful as it is today. And they need help. You know, that's a group that really needs our community to come out and support them, because it's, you know, a core group of about 15 people that are working down there. I can think of, you know, Michael Pelland and John Cordio are down there. They're cutting the grass with scissors at times. I joke, but, you know, sometimes it's not a joke. I watched Coach Pelland actually cut some grass around a goalpost with some scissors last year. So they love that field and they need some support. And I think there's support that's coming, but, you know, it's challenging. Money doesn't grow on trees, unfortunately. I wish it did.
No question about that, indeed. But you're absolutely right. How did I know you were going to go with the reference of the scissor cutting thing? Because I believe between them cutting it with scissors and talking to it to inspire, they have, I mean, done a phenomenal job. But of course, one of the keys to that point, and for them to be able to caretake it the way they did, and obviously have it look as beautiful as it did by Thanksgiving last year, put you in that pinch of you had to restrict access to just games, just football, and just, you know, a handful of games. And you guys were fortunate enough to get a playoff opportunity. So that added another night, you know, on the field before you got to, you know, that Thanksgiving game, because otherwise, as you had seen in the years immediately prior, the more games you put on it, the more strain you put on it in the fall, it is more than likely that will just turn to mud, especially if you get a particularly wet or cold and then thawing fall.
Yeah, we got very lucky last year. To your point, we only scheduled varsity football down there. We had no other contests on the field, really protected it. In fact, there are a couple nights where, you know, the long range forecast looked like we were going to have pouring rain the day of the game. And I was making phone calls to Fitchburg State saying, hey, what do you think about us getting on the turf up there, you know, knowing that I was trying to protect the grass. But the turf did make some pretty good headway in the past year in response to, again, the efforts that the the Crocker Field Restoration Committee put in, and then Gatsby Grounds, who is the company that we've contracted with to go down there and do the work that's required to upkeep a facility like that. And if you drive by Crocker right now, it's a carpet of emerald green. I mean, it is beautiful, but it doesn't happen without effort. I mean, we have work going on pretty much weekly right now.
That's absolutely amazing in these trying times. And you're absolutely correct. In central Massachusetts and right here in the Twin Cities of Leominster and Fitchburg, those two facilities, from a high school standpoint, you don't get them everywhere else. And I would argue you don't get them anywhere else in central Massachusetts. A lot of very nice facilities, but not that kind of mystique that Doyle and Crocker Field have, not that kind of full-on stadium feel that those two facilities have. The only other one that I could think of that has the legend, the lore, and obviously the facility would be Foley Stadium, in Worcester might be the other one that has that. And again, all those are right here in central Massachusetts. You've got to go east and into the Boston area to get fields that have that kind of lore and mystique. And even they're few and far between. We're very fortunate here in central Massachusetts to have those items. Coach, I want to jump ahead here, and we will definitely get together for a conversation again in the very near future here on Press Row. But I can't let you go on this one without talking about statewide tournament, because before, obviously, all of the COVID-19 pandemic shutdown stuff stole away all of the headlines in athletics. This was the story, of the year, was that 2 years down the road, where we're going with this whole new paradigm possibility, and it was ultimately voted on and selected, where statewide in all sports you will have some form of a playoff where brackets will no longer be done regionally. The state will be considered as one. It will either be done on a model of either 32 teams or 16 teams, depending on the sport, in multiple divisions that are still yet to be determined. So a lot of things that still have to be filled in and talked about over the next couple of years. But where did you fall out on the statewide system? And ultimately, what were your reservations, and what were the things that led you to believe this was a direction to go?
I think one of the biggest misconceptions people had when that vote came up was that a no against the statewide system was a vote for the status quo, and it wasn't. Going back, the last realignment, when Eastern Mass kind of pushed into Central Mass with basketball, and some of our Central Mass teams started playing out west, that was going to happen in earnest if we had voted down the statewide alignments. Fitchburg would have been in a Western school. We would have pushed out west. So this was really looking, I voted personally for the state tournament because looking at it, we're traveling regardless, right? We're traveling regardless. Being an urban school, our placement in divisionally when we go to the playoffs isn't great at times, because in the traditional sectional divisional alignment, there aren't enough teams in any given division to move an outlier school like us around. We have a student population of roughly 1,250, right? So that's a very large school in terms of from a straight enrollment number in central Massachusetts, but our participation numbers are very low because of our high needs population. High needs population being students who are economically disadvantaged, former ESL students or current ESL students, or students with disabilities. I mean, we range up over 50% with that one. We're one of actually 4 schools in Central Mass that have relatively high numbers. So our kids don't engage, they don't get involved at the same rate that a student at, let's say, Neshoba Regional does. So in the traditional sectional model, we would qualify for soccer, let's say, and that we would be placed in the Division I tournament, but our league play would be against small Division III teams, right? So we're always kind of misplaced. In this new state tournament, there's about 60 teams per division, and that allows for, I think, a more equitable stratification of schools based upon enrollments, and then some better appeal scenarios for schools like us that really don't belong playing against the Wachusett Regionals of the world, and would match up better with some smaller schools from around the state, around the same enrollment numbers as us. So, for me, when I looked at all the data, I thought the right vote was for the state tournament. I thought, the TMC put a ton of work into it. I have the fortune of working with, Joanna DiCarlo, and with the Midwatch AD. She sits on that committee. She's the AD at Westboro. She is a bright woman, works really hard. She's got a ton of integrity. And, you know, hearing her talk about it a bunch, I was sold. This is the way we kind of have to go.
No, you identified the what I thought was the horror show option, which was the east to central, central to west, and I joked recently the west to New York system because we were running out of places to shift people at this point in time.
Right.
You know, I didn't know if Lee was going to be playing in the Albany division. I wasn't sure where they were going, but it was just, I mean, that solution in and of itself to me was a non-starter. So I was with you 100% on that alone, looking at the two options, because status quo wasn't a choice. Going back to the way people preferred it pre-2013, not an option. So then if my options are more shifting or let's try something new, we're going to go with let's try something new, you know, every day of the week on that. And I think people sometimes they miss, I don't know, categorize where this whole thing fits, right? Because as you said, the discussion becomes enrollment. And one of the things we know coming down the pike is that enrollment is no longer going to be gender specific. They're going to do it on total enrollment in schools, which, as you point out, hurts a school like Fitchburg, because although enrollment, you know, male, female might have helped a little bit because at least within smaller numbers, there's still more people being considered than are actually participating. You know, perhaps maybe a fairer way is somewhere between enrollment and participation having to be brought together somehow to get those numbers, because considering that they're going to go straight participation and you're just going to take a total number for, or excuse me, straight enrollment and just total number of schools, you got 1,200, 2,000 kids, you got 500 kids, that's it. That's how we're categorizing, is a very cut and dry system, but as you said, leads to a lot of misplacements.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, the Midland Wachusett League, when we met this fall and started looking at our league alignments going forward, we started actually discussing this point, and largely because, you know, I kind of blindsided everybody and brought it up at a meeting, but it's something, you know, in being from Fitchburg, it's kind of, you know, important to us here. So I had to bring it up. And I think we're actually on the vanguard of coming up with a better system that uses an enrollment as a base, but uses some other factors as well. What I brought to the table there, and we actually voted it through in the mid-watch, was using the DESE numbers, the numbers that the state tracks for each school surrounding that high needs student, as a modifier against enrollment. So it's applied to every school. So every school has that number. We just use it as a reductive number against enrollment. So let's say we have 1,250 students and we have 50% high needs. Effectively, what I came up with was a little multiplier that you would use half of the 50%. So 25% of that value as an enrollment reducer, and we come down closer to about 900 students. And then that is the enrollment that gets compared. In the mid-watch, we actually use that for our upcoming alignment cycle. So that's why I say we're kind of on the vanguard for that. Actually, before I got on the call with you today, I was responding to an email from the urban ADs at the MIAA, a meeting we had in the fall, with, you know, the ADs from Springfield and Boston and Worcester, Fall River, Brockton, you know, many of the urban islands here in the state. And we all got together, and one thing they really want to push up to the TMC and the board of directors is some type of modifier that takes into account that really low-income students, students with disabilities, students who are English language learners don't participate on the same level as, you know, a student that is, I don't even know, not one of those categories. So, right, you know, because it could be anybody. It doesn't matter.
No, and actually, I think you just listened to the schools you just rattled off, right? And it shows kind of where the distinctions are. You just rattled off cities and towns that are 2 to 3 times the size of the population of Fitchburg itself, but those are the people you're going to meetings with. And I don't think if you put Springfield and Fitchburg next to each other, everybody's going to argue those two are the same size, just from the sheer number of schools, compared to Fitchburg is one total high school. So I just, that in and of itself shows where some of the dramatic lines are, where, like you said, somehow we have to cut through total numbers of people, amounts of humanity, against amounts of participating humanity in athletics.
Yeah, we've got to find some modifier that is equitably, that's used in a fashion so it affects all schools regardless of who you are, right? And that it's a undisputable number, right? It's an indisputable number. And that's why I really think we need to look at these numbers that, the Department of Education tracks for all schools, because they have some very specific statistics that they track for everybody, all school districts. And the reason that they track them is because they are impactful, right? When we talk about an economically disadvantaged child, that is impactful, right? In our district, we distributed thousands of Chromebooks to students who did not have access to distance learning. I mean, our staff here did an unbelievable job passing those things out, because in our district homes, we did not have the ability to get on the internet. We distributed Wi-Fi hotspots to kids. So if that's impacting their learning, how are those situations also impacting their ability to participate in an extracurricular sport? They could be an additional basketball or run track. So these are metrics that are out there. It's really, are we willing to, as an association, look at them and have an honest discussion about what's going on? Because sometimes the rich who are rich don't want to get poorer, right? That we have a situation where we have some school districts that really benefit from the way that things are set up, and some school districts that really don't benefit from the way things are set up, athletically and in the association. And I don't think that's anyone's fault. I just think that's the way it's been. But what better time than now in the new normal to start to address this stuff, right?
No question about that. Tom Flanagan, reporter from the Telegram, joined me for an episode last week, and he talked about, what he imagines in his mind these meetings might look like. And he imagines it as a couple of ADs from Eastern Mass going, how do we get, large school A and large school B to play in the state championship every single year and win a state title between them? Okay, we've got that done. Great. Let's move on. Next issue. He had me roaring, and it's an episode worth checking out. Episode 5 of Press Row with Tom Flanagan, just for that portion of the conversation. But before I let you go, Coach, I want to talk about max preps. But first, I've been playing this little game with the ADs about the statewide tournament. So Here's the hypothetical reaction for you. I didn't consider size. I didn't consider any of the great factors you just considered none of those. I pulled out my Massachusetts map. I picked Fitchburg and insert town. You tell me how, how did this take to you? Fitchburg, Newburyport. Fitchburg Carver, Fitchburg Bourne, Fitchburg Holyoke as matchups in any sport you like, or would you rather Fitchburg Wachusett, Fitchburg Neshoba, or Fitchburg Gardner? Which one do you prefer?
Well, the straightforward, obviously I'd like to stay close to home, right? But I mean, if you want the kind of facetious answer, I'm sick of losing to Wachusett and Neshoba, so I don't mind going out to some other schools and see if we play a little better out there, honestly. But that's a real thing, Todd, right? You could be in Williamstown and have to play Provincetown, and then, oh my God, what does that even look like? Good thing is we're a small state, because I know I listened to some podcasts. One I listened to is the Off-Duty ADs, and they talk about all the time in some of the bigger states. You could be traveling from East North Dakota all the way over to the west side of North Dakota, and you're talking a 6-hour drive or 7-hour drive to get the game done. So we're fortunate in that way, that even at its worst, we're talking to more than 3 hours, right?
Absolutely. I mean, hey, I think there's a balance to that, right? ADs have said to me, I'd rather not. I like my local schools. I like my regional rivalries. I like those. Or on the other side of that is what you're pointing to, which is the possibility. I mean, again, geographically, this was fun. Fitchburg Carver sounds like a fun game. Just to explain to where the kids are, where Carver is. King Richard there, and any form of ocean spray. That's Carver. Think about those kinds of things. Right? You got to kind of create connections, but it could create some really fun athletic activities, and I think that's the balance of choice here, right? It was continue with something that sounds horrible, or share the benefit of everybody's got to travel, everybody's got to take a little burden, and let's hope this injects a newfound energy into Massachusetts athletics. And I feel like that is at least what may come out of it.
I think when you throw up the bracket and it's a 32-team bracket, there's going to be that hope, like, ha, we're in it. We could get to the end, where for you and I who grew up at the sectional tournament, it made sense to us, right? But when you really look at how convoluted that system is, I think that this one's easier to explain to kids. You're in a tournament where the winner is the winner,
It doesn't get any more straightforward than that. And if we could sooner than later lose terms like Walker system, I can't complain about that possibility either. However, in place of things like the Walker system and other rules that have allowed the Sullivan rule and all these other terms, comes this preps ranking system. And I've been caveating this every time we talk about it. This was coming regardless of the statewide decision that got made. This contract was done, over with, signed, sealed, and delivered. Tournament Management Committee and Johanna DiCarlo did a great job highlighting this point that Max Preps was a done deal. That had no bearing on what was happening in the statewide tournament, because they had already agreed that whether it was a sectional tournament or a statewide tournament, this was going to be the new metric that was going to be used to determine who qualified for whatever the tournament was. Come the end, we now know it will be this future tournament, but Max Preps is coming. It's coming this fall. We'll see it, when we resume normal operations come this fall, is this Max Preps rating system. Now, I've struggled with this a bit because I've always treated Max Preps like I treat Wikipedia, not a legitimate source of information. Or one to really be skeptical of when it comes to preparing for an athletic event you're going to broadcast. But it's now going to be the deciding fact. Do you believe that Max Preps can be that reliable system that was going to have reliable information and reliable rankings that can govern athletics regardless of the sport?
I guess it's a matter of whether or not I believe it, because we're going there, right? That's what we have to use now. I've seen a lot of discussion, who's going to input everything, who's going to make sure that it's correct, because right now for our playoff seeding, we pretty much go to the TNG home team site and we rely on Jim Wilson and his minions to have everything correct. They tell me to do it, so I'm going to, they tell me to do it, so I'm going to put everything in, right? I'm going to enter everything into Max Preps and hope for the best. But I think you nailed it. I've always thought of them as being the Wikipedia. That's pretty apt description. The place where anybody can go and put on whatever you want, because most of the time when you look, it's not correct. So, I don't know. I'm going to trust it because they tell me to. That's the answer I can give you.
And we're going to hope for the best when it all comes out. That's where we're going to leave this conversation. Craig Antocci, Athletic Director, Fitchburg Public Schools and Fitchburg High School. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for having us into your home and into your wife's home office. We appreciate her loaning you the room for the time being, and it's been great having you here, Coach. We'll have you back soon.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
And we thank all of you so much for being with us on this edition of Press Row. Like, subscribe, and follow those of us here on Rivalry Family Media. Information right there on your screen. More great discussions to come in the weeks ahead. For Athletic Director Craig Antocci, I am Todd Robbins saying thank you so very much for joining us. And until next time, so long, everybody.